Chapter 17. The Bab's incarceration in the castle of CHIHRIQ. The incident of Ni'ala occurred in the middle of the month of Shaban in the year AH 1264, the 3rd of July to the 1st of August AD 1848. Towards the end of the same month, the Bab was brought to Tabriz, where he suffered at the hands of his oppressors a severe and humiliating injury. That deliberate affront to his dignity almost synchronized with the attack which the inhabitants of Ni'ala directed against Baha'u'llah and his companions. The one was pelted with stones by an ignorant and pugnacious people, the other was afflicted with stripes by a cruel and treacherous enemy. I shall now relate the circumstances that led to that odious indignity which the persecutors of the Bab chose to inflict upon him. He had, in pursuance of the orders issued by Haji Mirza Akhazi, been transferred to the castle of CHIHRIQ and consigned to the keeping of Yahya Khan-i Kurd, whose sister was the wife of Muhammad Shah, the mother of the Naibuz Sultani. Strict and explicit instructions had been given by the Grand Vizier to Yahya Khan, enjoining him not to allow anyone to enter the presence of his prisoner. He was particularly warned not to follow the example of Ali Khan-i Markui, who had gradually been led to disregard the orders he had received. The footnote here says, the Bab was subjected to a closer and more rigorous confinement at CHIHRIQ than he had been at Marku. Hence he used to call the former the grievous mountain, Jabal-i-Shadid, the numerical value of the word Shadid, 318, being the same as that of the name of CHIHRIQ, and the latter the open mountain, Jabal-i-Basit, from a traveller's narrative, note L, page 276. Despite the emphatic character of that injunction, and in the face of the unyielding opposition of the all-powerful Haji Mirza Akhazi, Yahya Khan found himself powerless to abide by those instructions. He too soon came to feel the fascination of his prisoner. He too forgot, as soon as he came into contact with his spirit, the duty he was expected to perform. At the very outset, the love of the Bab penetrated his heart and claimed his entire being. The Kurds who lived in CHIHRIQ, and whose fanaticism and hatred of the Shias exceeded the aversion which the inhabitants of Marku entertained for that people, were likewise subjected to the transforming influence of the Bab. Such was the love he had kindled in their hearts, that every morning, ere they started for their daily work, they directed their steps towards his prison, and gazing from afar at the castle which contained his beloved self, invoked his name and besought his blessings. They would prostrate themselves on the ground and seek to refresh their souls with the remembrance of him. To one another they would freely relate the wonders of his power and glory, and would recount such dreams as bore witness to the creative power of his influence. To no one would Yahya Khan refuse admittance to the castle. As CHIHRIQ itself was unable to accommodate the increasing number of visitors who flocked to its gates, they were enabled to obtain the necessary lodgings in Iski Shar, the old CHIHRIQ, which was situated at an hour's distance from the castle. Whatever provisions were required for the Bab were purchased in the old town and transported to his prison. One day the Bab asked that some honey be purchased for him. The price at which it had been bought seemed to him exorbitant. He refused it and said, "Honey of a superior quality could no doubt have been purchased at a lower price. I, who am your example, have been a merchant by profession. It behoves you all in your transactions to follow my way. You must neither defraud your neighbor nor allow him to defraud you. Such was the way of your master. The shrewdest and ablest of men were unable to deceive him, nor did he on his part choose to act ungenerously towards the meanest and most helpless of creatures." He insisted that the attendant who had made that purchase should return and bring back to him a honey superior in quality and cheaper in price. During the Bab's captivity in the castle of CHIHRIQ, events of a startling character caused grave perturbation to the government. It soon became evident that a number of the most eminent among the Sayyids, the Ulamas, and the government officials of Kui had espoused the cause of the prisoner and had completely identified themselves with his faith. Among them figured Mirza Muhammad Ali and his brother Buyuk Aka, both Sayyids of distinguished merit, who had risen with fevered earnestness to proclaim their faith to all sorts and conditions of people among their countrymen. A continuous stream of seekers and confirmed believers flowed back and forth as the result of such activities between Cui and CHIHRIQ. It came to pass at that time that a prominent official of high literary ability, Mirza Asadullah, who was later surnamed Dayan by the Bab, and whose vehement denunciations of his message had baffled those who had endeavored to convert him, dreamed a dream. When he awoke, he determined not to recount it to anyone, and, fixing his choice on 2 verses of the Quran, he addressed the following request to the Bab. "I have conceived 3 definite things in my mind. I request you to reveal to me their nature." Mirza Muhammad Ali was asked to submit this written request to the Bab. A few days later he received a reply, penned in the Bab's handwriting, in which he set forth in their entirety the circumstances of that dream, and revealed the exact texts of those verses. The accuracy of that reply brought about a sudden conversion. Though unused to walking, Mirza Asadullah hastened on foot along that steep and stony path which led from Cui to the castle. His friends tried to induce him to proceed on horseback to CHIHRIQ, but he refused their offer. His meeting with the Bab confirmed him in his belief and excited that fiery ardor which he continued to manifest to the end of his life. That same year the Bab had expressed his desire that 40 of his companions should each undertake to compose a treatise and seek, by the aid of verses and traditions, to establish the validity of his mission. His wishes were instantly obeyed, and the result of their labors was duly submitted to his presence. Mirza Asadullah's treatise won the unqualified admiration of the Bab and ranked highest in his estimation. He bestowed on him the name Dayan and revealed in his honor the Law-i-Hurufat, which is literally the tablet of the letters, in which he made the following statement: "Had the point of the Bayan," which is one of the titles of the Bab, "had the point of the Bayan no other testimony with which to establish his truth, this were sufficient, that he revealed a tablet such as this, a tablet such as no amount of learning could produce." The people of the Bayan, who utterly misconceived the purpose underlying that tablet, thought it to be a mere exposition of the science of Jafar, which is the science of divination. When at a later time, in the early years of Baha'u'llah's incarceration in the prison city of Akka, Jinabi Mubaligh made from Shiraz his request that he unravel the mysteries of that tablet, there was revealed from his pen an explanation which they who misconceived the words of the Bab might do well to ponder. Baha'u'llah adduced from the statements of the Bab irrefutable evidence proving that the appearance of the Manyushiruhullah, which is reference to Baha'u'llah, must needs occur no less than 19 years after the declaration of the Bab. The mystery of the Mustagath had long baffled the most searching minds among the people of the Bayan, and had proved an unsurmountable obstacle to their recognition of the Promised One. The Bab had himself, in that tablet, unravelled that mystery. No one, however, was able to understand the explanation which he had given. It was left to Baha'u'llah to unveil it to the eyes of all men. The untiring zeal which Mirza Asadullah displayed induced his father, who was an intimate friend of Haji Mirza Akazi, to report to him the circumstances which led to the conversion of his son, and to inform him of his negligence in carrying out the duties which the state had imposed upon him. He expatiated upon the eagerness with which so able a servant of the government had risen to serve his new master, and the success which had attended his efforts. A further cause for apprehension on the part of the government authorities was supplied by the arrival at CHIHRIQ of a dervish who had come from India, and who, as soon as he met the Bab, acknowledged the truth of his mission. All who met that dervish, whom the Bab had named Karula, during his sojourn at Iskishar, felt the warmth of his enthusiasm and were deeply impressed by the tenacity of his conviction. An increasing number of people became enamored of the charm of his personality and willingly acknowledged the compelling power of his faith. Such was the influence which he exercised over them that a few among the believers were inclined to regard him as an exponent of divine revelation, although he altogether disclaimed such pretensions. He was often heard to relate the following: "In the days when I occupied the exalted position of a Nawab in India, the BAB appeared to me in a vision. He gazed at me and won my heart completely. I rose and had started to follow him, when he looked at me intently and said, 'Divest yourself of your gorgeous attire, depart from your native land, and hasten on foot to meet me in Azerbaijan. In CHIHRIQ you will attain your heart's desire.' I followed his directions and have now reached my goal." The news of the turmoil which that lowly dervish had been able to raise among the Kurdish leaders in CHIHRIQ reached Tabriz, and was thence communicated to Tehran. No sooner had the news reached the capital than orders were issued to transfer the BAB immediately to Tabriz, in the hope of allaying the excitement which his continued residence in that locality had provoked. Before the news of this fresh order had reached CHIHRIQ, the BAB had charged Azim to inform Karula of his desire that he return to India and there consecrate his life to the service of the cause. Alone and on foot, he commanded him, he should return whence he came. With the same ardour and detachment with which he performed his pilgrimage to this country, he must now repair to his native land, and unceasingly labour to advance the interests of the cause. He also bade him instruct Mirza Abdul Baha'I Turshizi, who was living in Kui, to proceed immediately to Urumiyeh, where he said he would soon join him. Azim himself was directed to leave for Tabriz, and there informed Syed Ibrahim Khalil of his approaching arrival at that city. "Tell him," the BAB added, "that the fire of Nimrod will shortly be kindled in Tabriz, but despite the intensity of its flame no harm will befall our friends." No sooner had Karula received the message from his master than he arose to carry out his wishes. To anyone who wished to accompany him, he would say, "You can never endure the trials of this journey. Abandon the thought of coming with me. You would surely perish on your way, inasmuch as the BAB has commanded me to return alone to my native land." The compelling force of his reply silenced those who begged to be allowed to journey with him. He refused to accept either money or clothing from anyone. Alone, clad in the meanest attire, staff in hand, he walked all the way back to his country. No one knows what ultimately befell him. Muhammad Ali Zunuzi, surnamed Anis, was among those who heard of the message from the BAB in Tabriz and was fired with the desire to hasten to CHIHRIQ and attain his presence. Those words had kindled in him an irrepressible longing to sacrifice himself in his path. Syed Ali Zunuzi, his stepfather, a notable of Tabriz, strenuously objected to his leaving the city and was at last induced to confine him in his house and strictly watch over him. His son languished in his confinement until the time when his beloved had reached Tabriz and had been taken back again to his prison in CHIHRIQ. I have heard Sheikh Hassan Zunuzi relate the following. At about the same time that the BAB dismissed Azim from his presence, I was instructed by him to collect all the available tablets that he had revealed during his incarceration in the castles of Maku and CHIHRIQ, and to deliver them into the hands of Syed Ibrahim Khalil, who was then living in Tabriz, and urge him to conceal and preserve them with the utmost care. During my stay in that city, I often visited Syed Ali Zunuzi, who was related to me, and frequently heard him deplore the sad fate of his son. "He seems to have lost his reason," he bitterly complained. "He has, by his behavior, brought reproach and shame upon me. Try to calm the agitation of his heart, and induce him to conceal his convictions." Every day I visited him. I witnessed the tears that continually rained from his eyes. After the BAB had departed from Tabriz, one day, as I went to see him, I was surprised to note the joy and gladness which illumined his countenance. His handsome face was wreathed in smiles as he stepped forward to receive me. "The eyes of my beloved," he said as he embraced me, "have beheld this face, and these eyes have gazed upon his countenance. Let me," he added, "tell you the secret of my happiness. After the BAB had been taken back to CHIHRIQ, one day, as I lay confined in my cell, I turned my heart to him and besought him in these words: Thou beholdest, O my best beloved, my captivity and helplessness, and knowest how eagerly I yearn to look upon thy face. Dispel the gloom that oppresses my heart with the light of thy countenance. What tears of agonizing pain I shed that hour! I was so overcome with emotion that I seemed to have lost consciousness. Suddenly I heard the voice of the BAB, and lo, he was calling me. He bade me arise. I beheld the majesty of his countenance as he appeared before me. He smiled as he looked into my eyes. I rushed forward and flung myself at his feet. Rejoice, he said, the hour is approaching when, in this very city, I shall be suspended before the eyes of the multitude, and shall fall a victim to the fire of the enemy. I shall choose no one except you to share with me the cup of martyrdom. Rest assured that this promise which I give you shall be fulfilled. I was entranced by the beauty of that vision. When I recovered, I found myself immersed in an ocean of joy, a joy the radiance of which all the sorrows of the world could never obscure. That voice keeps ringing in my ears. That vision haunts me both in the daytime and in the night season. The memory of that ineffable smile has dissipated the loneliness of my confinement. I am firmly convinced that the hour at which his pledge is to be fulfilled can no longer be delayed. I exhorted him to be patient and to conceal his emotions. He promised me not to divulge that secret, and undertook to exercise the utmost forbearance towards Sayyid Ali. I hastened to assure the father of his determination, and succeeded in obtaining his release from his confinement. That youth continued until the day of his martyrdom to associate, in a state of complete serenity and joy, with his parents and kinsmen. Such was his behavior towards his friends and relatives that, on the day he laid down his life for his beloved, the people of Tabriz all wept and